All right, welcome everybody. I am so excited to be here with you to share all of the exciting updates. I know that you guys have a mid-year testing window, so this is the perfect time for us to do a mid-year test webinar. It looks like y'all's window is February 12th through the 23rd. And from what I've been told, you guys are pretty active users. So I am looking forward to chatting with you guys and just talking about the mid-year assessment and what to do next. So if you could utilize the chat box really quick and just make sure that everybody can hear me and see my screen. I'll wait for that. Thank you. All right, great. Looks like everybody is able to hear me and see my screen. So here we go. My name is Emily. Just want to briefly introduce myself and give you a little bit of background of who I am. So I am a former educator, spent 10 years in the classroom before I stepped away to pursue some other professional development opportunities. But during that time, I was teaching in an inclusion classroom. So I'm very much used to spinning a lot of plates, just like you guys. And just really needing something to address all of the different learning needs and learning styles within my classroom. And so this is the fourth year that I've partnered with Happy Numbers to deliver these webinars to teachers like you that are looking to just meet all of your students where they're at in their math experience and create some growth with that. We're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes. I'm going to start with just a brief overview of the Happy Numbers assessments, and we'll talk about the methodology behind the tests. I think it's really important for you to know about the mid-year and how it is organized and structured, and why it's important for students, teachers, and administrators. I will skip over the setup of the assessment just because it looks like you guys already have your assessment scheduled, so you don't really need help with that. But then the chunk of the second half of this webinar is going to be spent in a demo account where I will walk you through what to look for when you're evaluating your results and next steps for just different situations that will probably arise once you get this data. So like I said, I do want to start with just an overview of the Happy Numbers assessments and their different purposes. So Happy Numbers provides 3 assessments during the academic year. We have the placement test, the mid-year, and end-of-year assessment. The placement test, as you know, is mandatory for all students in K-5. Your pre-K students are exempt from taking the placement test. And the purpose of the placement test is to evaluate each student's initial proficiency level. And the program tailors an individualized learning pathway for that student. The mid-year is what's going to allow you as a teacher to evaluate that student's growth since the beginning of the school year, and the program will adjust the student's position in the curriculum if needed, and we'll talk about that. But the end of year assessment then evaluates the overall student growth from the beginning of the year and allows you to see whether each student is ready for the next grade. And all 3 assessments are adaptive in nature, featuring 20 to 30 items, depending on the test and the student's grade level. So today we are going to focus on the mid-year assessment and its design and purpose. You know that at the onset of the school year, your student took that placement test, and that really does a great job of, finding that initial proficiency and establishing a personalized learning pathway. However, as the school year progresses, there is a need to reevaluate students' knowledge. And that's because they're not only addressing knowledge gaps through Happy Numbers, but also through their interactions with teachers and at home. So the mid-year really does become an essential tool because it is going to allow you to gain a deeper insight into student achievement. And it's also going to allow the program to adjust their learning pathway, taking into account the topics mastered outside the scope of Happy Numbers. So let's dive deeper into the mechanics of the assessments. As I mentioned earlier, the mid-year assessment does operate on an adaptive model. However, unlike the placement test, where adaptability is going to be based on the student's response, the mid-year adapts according to the student's position within the curriculum. And the assignment of the mid-year involves considering that parameter and then also the student's registered classroom grade. Matching these two data points is what creates an adaptive mid-year test for each student. So here's a graphic to show you all of the possible mid-year test scenarios. As you can see, there are 4 test difficulty levels, which are color-coded. And you can see that 4th and 5th grades, for example, have all 4 difficulty levels, while grade 2 only has 3. So let's explore with a 4th grade student working on tasks from the end of 2nd grade curriculum. So to determine the appropriate mid-year test for this student, you're going to locate the column, the intersection where the 4th grade row meets with the grade 2 column at the top. And then upon examination, you can see that this student's test is going to cover 3rd grade content, but it will also cover some topics from the previous grade, 2nd grade. In other words, Happy Numbers wants to make sure that the student is tested not only in the current and future areas, but also on the skills that were previously mastered for the fullest picture. And just keep in mind that if you have a student who really hasn't made a lot of progress in Happy Numbers or is just starting out, the program will use their initial point determined in their placement test to help determine the appropriate test level for them. After completing the test, one of 2 things will happen. Either your students will grow or they won't. Hopefully, the majority of your students are growing, but as we know, we're dealing with kids. And so we'll talk about the problem-solving strategies that you can use when looking at your students' results. But just know that this page is to show you that after completing the test, the program will assess the level of mastery and calculate the result, which is going to be reflected in a Happy Numbers score. And I will go deeper into how to interpret these results in a little bit. But if a student's performance on the test exceeds their current position in the Happy Numbers curriculum, then they're promoted to their current relevant level. So as a result, students can advance up to 1.5 grade equivalents beyond their current standing. So as you can see, I have a student, Olivia, and during the mid-year, at the beginning of the year, she was placed at the beginning of 2nd grade. However, when she took the mid-year, you can see that based on her performance, her curriculum placement was adjusted to a mid-3rd grade level. It was evident that she had mastered certain topics that she had previously showed a lack of understanding, and that led to the closure of learning gaps. And so there's no need for Olivia to continue working in 2nd grade modules based on those results. We're not going to promote her in the curriculum to a more relevant grade. The program does that automatically for you. However, if you have students like Lucas who make no growth or go negative, the program is going to keep the student at their current level. So in other words, the test is never going to downgrade a student. They're just going to assume that that student needs to continue with the current module that they're on. So this is how our test works on the student side. It's going to measure their growth since placement and adjust their pathway if needed. For teachers, it's going to evaluate the growth for students that they've achieved, and it's going to place that result into a Happy Numbers score, which is going to allow you to provide some next steps for your students based on what you find on your report. And then for the administrators, there's an assessment report that will give you the evolution of student performance, and you can compare proficiency levels on both assessments at a district or grade level. All right, so looks like we do have some hands in the air. I will just say, go ahead and use that chat box to ask your questions. I will periodically stop and answer those questions. I'll also leave this time at the end to answer questions. So if you're utilizing the hand raise feature, feel free to just pop your question in the chat box. Speaking of chat box, let's go ahead and do a quick quiz. So what is the main purpose of the mid-year test? I'll give you a hint. There are 2 answers. So place your 2 answers in the chat box and let's see what you got. All right, so looks like a lot of us are choosing A and C, which is correct. There are two purposes of the mid-year. It is to A, adjust an individual's learning pathway, and C, evaluate math growth since the placement test. Good job. Awesome. So moving on, once your students take the test, just know that we do understand that sometimes retesting is necessary. For example, the student was maybe distracted, or you found out that someone was helping the student, or you're just not satisfied with the result for any reason, you can reset the test within 2 weeks after it's completed. There'll be a reset button next to the test score, and you can use it if you want to retest a student. If for some reason you don't see the reset button, you can just email support@happynumbers.com with the class code and the student's name, and we can reset it for you on our end if you don't have that showing up for you. Some of you might be wondering what the test will look like for students, so let's take a look. When it's time for the assessment and students log into their accounts, they will see the assessment instead of their usual progress bar, and here is what it looks like for different grade levels. Teachers do often ask me whether they can see student responses on the test, and the answer is no. The quantile framework for mathematics is what powers the Happy Numbers assessments, and these assessments and the items on them must remain confidential. So that's just to comply with their privacy policy and to maintain the validity of the test. All right, before we jump to the Q&A session, I am going to go ahead and switch over to my demo account. I do want to just kind of show you guys a few things for when you get your students' results. So after your students take the assessment, if you just want to see assessment data and nothing else, you can go to this assessment tab. Here you can see, like I said, just the assessment data for each of your students. I do want to direct your attention to this hyperlink that says how to read test scores. This is available on your end as well. If you log in and click on the assessment tab, you will see this hyperlink that pops up with this window. And I do want to talk about the Happy Numbers score. It's our new scoring system, which really does simplify evaluating your students' results. As I mentioned earlier, these assessments were developed by Metrometrics, and they are the people who developed Lexile for reading and quantile scores for math. So if you're familiar with Lexiles and reading, you know that the scores that are provided don't really correlate with a specific grade level. You end up having to do a lot of comparing against a chart. And the same is true with the quantile scores. So Happy Numbers has made the process super easy by translating the score for you and providing it as a Happy Numbers score. And so this little graphic here is going to show you how to read those scores. The first number or letter is going to represent the grade level that student is currently testing in. And then the second two numbers represent the percentage of the grade curriculum that they've covered at that level. So if a student scores a 210, that means they are in the early second grade knowledge of math. This also gives you the color coding system. So depending on what your roster is registered as, your students' color coding based on their Happy Numbers score will be as follows. So if they are 2 or more grade levels below the rostered grade level, they will have a pink dot. If they are 1 grade level below, they have a yellow dot. On grade level is going to be light green, and above grade level is going to be dark green. So you do have this graphic here to use at any time. Now, I want to go to the yearly dashboard. The yearly dashboard is going to give me more information, and this is where I'm going to tell you to come after you get your students' test scores, because as you can see while I scroll down, it gives a fuller picture of the students' progress based on those assessments. I do want to just let you know my demo account is going to be for a first grade classroom. I have 16 students, and you can see that many of them did make growth over here, but I do have some students who did not make a lot of growth or went negative. And so we'll talk about each of those scenarios because all of those are very realistic and will probably be indicative of what you see when you get your students' results. So let's start with an easy example. Let's start with someone like Nate. You can see here that Nate is a first grader, but was placed on starting at the pre-K level. He scored a PK 80 on his placement test, which means that he is going to start in the middle of pre-K and work through finishing those modules. He was actually finished with the pre-K modules and working through the kindergarten modules when he was prompted to take the mid-year assessment. And you can see that he scored a 100 on the mid-year. What that means is that he is at the beginning of first grade now. And so, like my example with Olivia, there's no need for Nate to go back and work on these kindergarten modules. This is a classic example of what we want to see happening and what the purpose of Happy Numbers is. I'm providing on grade level, in this case, first grade instruction, but I'm allowing Nate to work independently on closing these gaps that he had in pre-K and kindergarten. The matching of those two methods is what gets that student closer to grade level. So now Nate is going to be pushed into starting now with a module in first grade, and that is now his zone of proximal development. Couple of things. Keep in mind, a growth of 100 points indicates a full year's worth of curriculum growth. So on the mid-year, you should be expecting around 50 points of growth for students who are completing the recommended usage of 45 to 60 minutes. So that's what this plus sign means, is that he grew an equivalent of 1.2 grade levels in math thus far. So students like Nate, they don't need a lot of your attention, right? So we're going to move to some students who will need your attention and will need some intervention from you. So let's start with Sasha. Sasha didn't make any growth since the placement test, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? I've been using the program since August, but when I look at a few things on her report, it's going to provide me more insight. So moving here, we can see that this column tells us the average weekly time spent, and her weekly average is 16 minutes. That is really low. Happy Numbers is going to recommend 45 minutes minimum per week. That is research proven. With that being said, the easy fix is going to be reevaluating my math block and getting her more time in the platform so that we can work on addressing those gaps, because we know that she can't continue to build in her math understanding if she doesn't have a firm foundation. Just like we would expect 50 points of growth, we would also expect at this point about 50% curriculum progress. No matter where your student is at in the program, you should be aiming for close to 45 minutes a week and close to 50% curriculum progress at this point in the year. So students like Sasha, that is kind of an easier fix, right? We just need to make sure that we are allowing her time in the platform, maybe even partnering with her parents at home to get her more time and more practice. But what do you do if you have a student who is making progress but still not showing growth? So let's look at an example of Angela. You can see in this case, Angela actually went negative, and no, that doesn't mean that she lost math knowledge, right? But this is indicating that there are some serious gaps that the program is trying to address, but there needs to be some more intervention provided by you as the teacher. So the students like Angela are where you're going to spend your maximum amount of effort. And that's what I love about the mid-year is it's going to really pull those students out and shine a light on them and help you prioritize where you provide your support. Angela scored a K70 on the beginning of the year test. That means that she was in the late stages of kindergarten in her math understanding. So the program placed her in the middle of kindergarten and she was working through those modules. When she took the mid-year test, she scored a K65. When we look at her average weekly time spent, 23 minutes is better, right? Depending on breaks and holidays, it may not always be that 45-minute mark. The 45% progress, though, is what's indicating that she is making some progress in the platform, but there are still some things based on the placement test and the mid-year that she's missing, and it's not what's allowing her to be pushed further along in the curriculum. I would expect her to show, some growth. And so I'm going to click on Angela's name. Anytime a student's name is in blue, you can pull up a detailed report. and you're going to start looking through that student's skills report. And as you toggle and as you expand this report, I see right away that the program is indicating that she needs some help with subtraction within 5 fluency. She actually is working on subtraction within 10. She has a little bit of a more developing understanding, but you guys know, just like me, that she can't continue to build on her subtraction knowledge if she doesn't have a firm foundation. So with that being said, what I love about the program is that it's not just going to indicate where students need help. Our program also provides you with intervention tools. So I'm going to go back to my page here. And if you joined me at the beginning of the year, I talked about our 2 newest features, the first being assignments. And that to me is going to be my first level of intervention, providing some more direct response to a student's need. These assignments are what you love about Happy Numbers on Demand. They are additional modules for practice to supplement a student's individual learning pathway. So I'm going to add an assignment, and I'm going to build this assignment for Angela. You have a couple choices on the assignment size. I would never suggest a 15-minute task set for a student who is struggling. In the beginning of the year webinar, I talk about some creative ways to use a 15-minute task set, but this is not a situation for that. I would say we want to stick with either a 5-minute or a 10-minute task set. I'm going to stick with 10 minutes, and I'll show you why in just a minute. I'm going to come to kindergarten, and I'm going to select the subtraction domain and find the skill. And when I click the box for subtraction within 5 fluency guided practice, I can preview that assignment, and I can see that this assignment is going to be what it says. It's going to be guided. It's going to use more concrete and pictorial representation to teach that skill. Now, because I selected a 10-minute task set, I can select one more skill or one more practice module. So I'm going to select the subtraction within 5 fluency practice. The regular practice is going to remove some of the scaffolding, and it's going to start to rely on the student to connect the concrete and the pictorial with the abstract equation. And so in a perfect world, we would have Angela do the subtraction guided practice. She would, rock that. She would get a good, firm understanding, and then she would flow into the regular practice. And then I know that that skill has been addressed and that she now understands. The last thing you're going to do is come down here and select a range with which you want the student to complete the assignment. You can name it whatever you want. She will not see this. And then please note, this is really important, that during this window, when Angela gets on, she is going to be sent to this practice. It's going to block her individual pathway, and she has to finish this assignment before she goes back to her pathway. So the program's going to assume that during this range, you have made this assignment the priority. Then you assign it, and you can go to your assignment list to view all of the data. Let's just fast forward in time. Let's say that I went ahead and Angela did that assignment. You can actually watch assignment results live, but you don't have to. In this case, I'm going to click on details, and it's going to pull the students who need intervention. In this case, I gave this assignment to 3 different students, and you can see that the program's indicated that 2 need intervention. Let's see, Tina, you asked, if you only put 1 day, does the assignment drop the next day? Yes. If the assignment expires before the student gets on, then they won't receive it. And yes, Eva, great question. Anytime the students are spending working in Happy Numbers does work towards their minutes. So whatever their goal is, these minutes count towards that. If you choose to watch an assignment live, like in this case, I wanted to see how Angela did. I was concerned that she wouldn't be able to even do the guided practice, and I actually ended up canceling the assignment for her because I noticed after 5 minutes that she only had an accuracy of 38%. So just note that you can always cancel an assignment if you want to. You can always reassign an assignment. So in this case, I already can tell that Angela's struggling with the guided practice, which indicates that I now need to move to more direct intervention. Haley, I let finish the assignment. And you can see here that while she has a little bit of a firmer understanding, the program is still indicating that her accuracy is really low. And so I'm going to actually pull Angela and Haley together. Anywhere where you have details, make sure to view those just to kind of get a full picture of, things like how much it took, how many minutes it took them, and what their accuracy was. So now that I've decided that Angela and Haley need more direct intervention, what you would typically have to do if you didn't have happy numbers is you would have to go to your Google Drive or your filing cabinet or your desktop, wherever you keep all of your resources, and find something that you could use to reteach subtraction within 5 fluency. However, Happy Numbers has taken the process of that and made it way easier for you by providing you with a K through 5 printables library. So I'm going to use the kindergarten printable for subtraction to provide some direct intervention. You can click on standard tags, you can type at the top, you can filter. There's tons of ways to search for the printables. In this case, subtraction within 5 fluency. There's one option, and that's fine because this printable actually comes in multiple levels of differentiation, which is absolutely fabulous. What I would suggest is pulling Angela and Haley and using the easy page as my teaching tool to build that firm foundation. And then depending on how things go, you can give both students the medium, or, if Haley was my student who had a little bit of a firmer understanding from the get-go, so maybe I give her the challenging and give Angela the medium. But just know that you have this library at your fingertips to use however you want, but this is definitely a great way to provide that direct intervention based on those assignment results. A lot of teachers ask me, how did I decide to group those 3 students together? Based on my skills report, and hopefully your skills report is starting to populate with some colors. This is a great overview. Just visually, I could see right away that I have several students who are struggling with kindergarten at a subtraction level. I'm sorry, subtraction at a kindergarten level, excuse me. And so when I scroll down and select subtraction and show only students who need help, you can see here that the program has indicated several students who need some intervention. And that is how I decided to assign subtraction within 5 fluency to these students. I do also want to make sure to remind you to click on these drop-down arrows. These details are even more specific in the skills report. And these are great to review before you sit down with students to provide intervention. Because you can see here that Sasha's not struggling with subtraction within 5 as a whole. She's really struggling with certain components within this standard. So for example, solve more subtraction problems, rephrasing subtraction is taking away. That's really going to help guide my instruction, because now I'm going to be very intentional when I sit down with that student or the group of students. I'm going to make sure to use subtraction and taking away interchangeably. She looks like she's also struggling with using or knowing what the minus and equal signs mean. So I'm going to make sure to be, very cognizant and ask those questions throughout my instruction, just to really help bring this skill up to a developing or mastered level. Maria, so yes, the assignments are available in Spanish. Let me show you how to check your settings. In Happy Numbers at the very top, you go to your roster. So click on roster. And here is the language option. Right now I have mine set to English or Spanish. So that does give students the ability to go back and to go and change it. If you don't have any students that need that support or are not ESOL students, then I do suggest changing that to just English only. But you do have to leave it on English or Spanish if you have a student who needs that. And the printables are also available in both English and Spanish. And you can toggle here to create those PDFs accordingly. Let's see. Are the assignments exactly the same as when you sit with the student? So the Happy Numbers modules, the way it works is the assignments are going to be a little bit lengthier, depending on the amount of time that you select for that assignment. And it's also going to be targeting the skill as a whole. So with that being said, place value tens and ones, depending on the time that you set up, it's going to adjust accordingly. Now, when you go into the skills report, for example, or a student's weekly dashboard, and you're looking at those details and you see that little play button next to this is a task within the skill. So think skill as big picture. Tasks are very, very specific components that students must be able to do to show proficiency on the skill as a whole. So these are going to be very, very specific, whereas the assignments feature is going to take all of these tasks and combine them into an assignment module. Hopefully that answers your question. Gina, so Gina is asking a great question about the tasks assigned. Some students get a lot of tasks in a week and some don't. That all has to do with several things. It has to do with where your students are at in the current curriculum. Let's see if I can go back to a previous week here. And I do have a demo account, so I apologize. Not all of this is going to be active. However, the task target for each student is going to be determined by where the student's at in the curriculum and what skill they're working on. So some skills need more tasks, right? Some skills are more robust and require a lot of smaller building blocks, whereas some skills are not as robust. And depending on where your student is at, just know that the task is always going to be appropriate for each student, and it's going to be based on where they're at in the curriculum and also how much time they're allotted. So whatever their time target is, that's also going to be factored in. So students who have a larger time target, that does mean that they are going to be required to do maybe a few more tasks. But again, it all just depends on those two parameters. Does the program advance a student to the next grade level if they have shown mastery? Yes. So you saw in several of my examples that if a student does exceed their current position in the curriculum, they will be promoted to a more relevant level. And it will also indicate that once they take the end of year test, it will indicate how many of your students are ready for the next grade level. That will populate here after your students finish the end of year. Angela, reassigning the test. To do that, you would go to your assessment tab. You have 2 weeks after the testing window to reset a test. So that's why none of mine are showing up, because I did mine in November. But if you need to reset a test for a student, you can reach out to support@happynumbers.com with the student's name and your class code. Let me go back to that slide so you can see that. And you can let them know that you want to reset the test. So that, Angela, I think you were my person. No, I'm sorry. That was another person asked about if the curriculum was too difficult. That would be a good alternative for that student as well. Because at this point, you're going to have to manually go in and make some selections, or I would suggest just resetting their placement test. So I can't remember who, Angelita. Angelita, I would suggest this route. Just send an email to support@happynumbers.com with that class code and student name and let them know, hey, I had a student who received assistance and now I need to reset the test. Great questions, guys. Does anybody else have questions, or were there any questions that I did not address? I'm going back through the chat because there were a lot of questions all at once, which is awesome. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to learn more about Happy Numbers. Veronica, if you reset the test, can you schedule the test to begin after 8 a.m. or during school hours? So yeah, once you set up that testing window, Veronica, there's no time. It's just whenever the student logs in, they're going to be presented with the assessment instead of their usual progress bar. And you can take the test in several sittings. So if you have a fire drill, if the student has to go to the bathroom, if they get sick, whatever it may be, if they receive testing accommodations, you can pause the test and come back as long as you're within that window, and the student will pick up where they left off. You're welcome, guys. I'm so glad that this was helpful. And again, thank you for your participation and for your great questions. And good luck with the rest of your school year.